My name is Simon, and the end of my marriage was documented not in a lawyer's office, but in the primary-colored chaos of my daughter's playroom, filed between a stuffed elephant and a wooden puzzle piece of a duck. It was a Sunday, the kind of soft, slow Sunday that feels like a held breath. My wife, Leela, was at her weekly yoga and intention-setting class. Our 2-year-old daughter, Ren, was napping. I was performing the quiet, meditative act of tidying the tectonic plates of her Toybox, a ritual I found soothing in its simple logic. At the very bottom, beneath a layer of fuzzy balls and silicone teething rings, my fingers brushed against something that was not a toy. It was the corner of a sleek, gray folder, the kind Leela used for her client presentations as a high-end branding consultant. I pulled it out, expecting to find misplaced mood boards for a cosmetics launch. The cover was blank. I opened it. The first page was a title, in Leela's elegant, minimalist font, Project Phoenix Phase 1, Asset and Liability Audit. A cold finger traced my spine. Phoenix. Rebirth from ashes. My stomach tightened. I turned the page. It was a spreadsheet. Meticulously organized, columns were labeled joint asset, current valuation, post-separation allocation, notes. I scanned the list. Our house, her 401k, my 401k, the investment portfolio, the vacation property in the Berkshires, her car, my car, each had a valuation and a proposed split that was aggressively in her favor. A 70-30 split on most items, with the 70 consistently flowing to her column. The notes were coldly strategic. Argue for based on primary caregiver status plus career sacrifice. Liquidate. Use proceeds to pay down primary residence debt. Claim necessity. My heart was a dull drum in my ears. This wasn't a dream or a fear. It was a business plan for my dismantling. Then I saw the final section. Not a column, but a standalone box at the bottom of the page. The header read, Liabilities. There were 3 entries. 1, joint mortgage. Note, refinance into my name only post-settlement. Used Berkshire sale proceeds. 2, Simon's student loan debt. Note, argue this is premarital, non-negotiable. He retains. And 3, Simon. Just my name, Simon, listed as a liability, not my husband, not co-parent, an entry, an obligation to be managed, quantified, and shed. The world in the sun-drenched playroom took on a sharp, hyper-real clarity. The cheerful yellow of the walls felt mocking. The scent of lavender from the diffuser turned cloying. I was a line item in my wife's exit strategy, buried among my daughter's blocks. To understand the depth of this calculus, you have to understand the story Leela and I were supposed to be living. We were the complementary pair. She was the flame, ambitious, visionary, with a taste for the exquisite. I was the hearth, steady, grounding, a history professor who found joy in archives and the soft chaos of fatherhood. We'd met when she was getting her MBA and sat in on one of my lectures on the Gilded Age. You made Robert Barron sound poetic, she'd said after, her smile a challenge. I was captivated. For years it worked. I gave her a foundation of calm. She gave my quiet world a shot of glamour. When Ren was born, I took a semester of paternity leave, then scaled back to adjunct work to be the primary parent. It was a choice I adored. I loved the slow mornings, the library story times, the profound privilege of witnessing a person come into being. Leela's career skyrocketed. She traveled, closed deals, built her personal brand as a mindful mogul. We were modern. We were a team. But the team had developed a silent hierarchy. My contributions, the made meals, the managed household, the emotional labor of parenting were the necessary infrastructure, but they didn't appear on a P&L statement. Her contributions paid for the beautiful infrastructure. I felt it in small ways.
her gentle corrections on how I dressed Ren for her Instagram photos, her suggestions that I network more with other faculty, the way my world of books and baby food began to feel small in the gleaming landscape of her success.
The spreadsheet was the brutal, unfeeling truth of how she saw that dynamic. I wasn't just less profitable, I was a net loss, a liability. I closed the folder. I placed it back in the toy box, exactly as I found it. My hands were steady, but my mind was a war room. This was not a moment for hurt feelings. This was intelligence. This was a blueprint for my financial and emotional siege, and I had just been handed the plans by sheer, stupid luck. I did not confront. Confrontation would be emotional, and emotion was a weakness her plan anticipated. She'd have practiced her responses. "It's just a thought exercise, Simon. You're taking a brainstorming document too literally. It's my anxiety, planning for worst-case scenarios." No. I needed to move from the position of the discovered liability to the undisclosed auditor. I began to audit our life with the cold eye of a forensic accountant. I checked our shared digital accounts. I found a second, secret email she used. The password was Ren's birthday plus Phoenix. Inside, correspondence with a notoriously aggressive divorce attorney, a woman known for high net worth, contentious dissolutions. There were draft retainer agreements. There were calendar invites for consultations labeled PPMTG, Project Phoenix Meetings. I reviewed our finances. She had, over the last year, been quietly funneling bonus money into a separate account at a new bank. She'd been using her personal credit card to make large purchases, a new laptop, expensive jewelry, then paying it off from the joint account, effectively laundering our shared money into her sole possessions. I observed her behavior with new, chilling clarity. Her yoga and intention-setting classes often ran long. I'd later find the location was near her lawyer's office. Her newfound interest in financial independence podcasts took on a sinister hue. Her critiques of my career, once framed as loving concern, were now revealed as bullet points in a case for minimizing my earning potential and maximizing her support claim.
Her plan was a masterpiece of cold-blooded strategy. She would file first, presenting her spreadsheet as a reasonable starting point. She'd leverage her role as the higher earner, and more crucially, my role as the primary caregiver against me. She'd argue that my choice to be a hands-on father had stunted my career, and thus she owed less support. She'd push for the house, for Ren's stability, the bulk of the investments, and limit my custody to a standard every other weekend schedule, arguing her flexible work-from-home lifestyle was superior for a child, despite her constant travel. I was to be left with my student debt, a small buyout, and the title of disposable parent. My revenge, therefore, could not be about winning her back. It was about surviving her. It was about rewriting her exit plan so thoroughly that she wouldn't recognize the destination. I needed to turn her own weapons against her. Her language was strategy, branding, leverage. Mine would be too. Phase 1, rebranding the liability. I stopped being Simon the professor. I became Simon the archivist. I began meticulously documenting everything, not with emotion, but with evidence. I kept a detailed log of all childcare, house management, and domestic labor I performed, hours spent, tasks completed. I scanned and saved every receipt for household goods I purchased. I recorded instances where I cared for Ren while Lila traveled or worked late, with timestamps and photos. I was building an unassailable case for my irreplaceable role, not as a sacrifice, but as a value add she had financially benefited from for years. Phase 2, financial counterintelligence. I opened my own separate account at a different bank. I didn't move money yet. That would be discoverable. Instead, I began quietly redirecting small, regular automatic deposits from my adjunct pay. I consulted my own lawyer, a razor-sharp man named Ira, who specialized in father's rights and financial forensics. He said, "She's built a castle on a hill," Ira said, reviewing the Toybox spreadsheet. "We're not going to charge the gates, we're going to tunnel underneath." Phase 3, the strategic narrative shift. This was the psychological warfare. I began to subtly, consistently reframe our narrative in conversations with mutual friends, our families, and on the rare social media posts I made. I was no longer Simon who stays home with Ren. I was Simon who is pioneering a modern co-parenting model while completing his book on 19th century economic dissent. I began talking about my consulting with the university press. I planted the seed that my low-earning career was a conscious, valuable choice that enabled her success, not a personal failing. I made my contribution sound intentional, prestigious, and expensive to replace. I also began to gently and irrevocably shift the bond with Ren, not by alienating Lila, but by making our connection so visibly profound, so documented in its daily magic, that the idea of her getting primary custody would seem not just unfair, but cruel to an outside observer. We had daddy-daughter research trips to historical sites. I taught her silly songs about historical figures. Our bond wasn't just caregiving, it was a culture, a tiny, beautiful world.
The final move was a piece of theatrical genius courtesy of Ira. We needed to force her hand before she was ready to file, to make her play a weak card. I accidentally left a single printed page on my desk at home. It was a fake but highly realistic email chain between me and a publishing agent discussing a substantial advance for my book, contingent on a period of focused writing travel. The numbers were plausible enough to be worrying. The subtext was clear. Simon, the liability, was about to become an asset, and he might need to travel for work. 2 days later, the folder was gone from the Toybox. The trap was sprung. That evening, Lila was jittery. She finally spoke over dinner, her voice straining for calm. "Simon, we need to talk about our future. I've been doing some thinking, some planning. I think we've grown in different directions." I put my fork down. I looked at her, this beautiful strategist, and I felt nothing but a vast, quiet clarity. "Are you referring to Project Phoenix, Lila? The asset and liability audit?" Her face went blank with sheer, uncomprehending shock. It was the most honest expression I had seen on her in years. "I found it," I said softly, "in Ren's Toybox, where you listed me between the mortgage and the student loans."
She stammered, the script shattered. It wasn't like that. It was a stress exercise. You don't understand the pressure I'm under."
"I understand perfectly," I said, standing. I walked to my briefcase and pulled out 2 folders. I slid the first one to her. It was a copy of her spreadsheet with my additions in red ink. Corrections to the asset valuations, legal citations to her proposed splits, and a final tally at the bottom, estimating the true cost of replacing my domestic and parental labor, calculated by a forensic economist. The number was staggering. "This," I said, "is your fantasy, based on flawed data and what my lawyer calls a breathtaking degree of bad faith." I slid the second folder to her. This one was mine. It contained my logs, my documentation, the evidence of her secret account, the communications with her lawyer, and on top, a clean, new proposed settlement. "This," I said, my voice now the steady, lecturing tone I used in a classroom, "is reality. You will agree to a truly equitable 50-50 split of all assets and debts. You will agree to a co-parenting schedule that reflects my status as primary psychological parent. Ren resides with me during the school week. You will reimburse the joint account for the funds you diverted. In return, I will not file a motion for sanctions based on your concealment of assets and your demonstrable plan to orchestrate a fraudulent dissipation of marital property. I will also not send this entire packet," I tapped my folder, "to the partners at your firm, who I suspect would find the branding of one's husband as a liability to be a fascinating case study in ethics." She stared, utterly hollowed out. The architect of her own rebirth now saw only the scorched earth. You've been planning this, she whispered. No, Lila. You planned an exit. I planned a defense. You drew a map to bury me. I just learned the terrain better. The divorce was swift. Her lawyer, faced with my mountain of evidence and the threat of professional ruin for Lila, advised settlement. We got the 50-50 split. I got the house, its mortgage now mine alone, its walls holding the memories of my victory. Most importantly, I got primary custody. Ren lives with me. Lila has her every other weekend, in Wednesday dinners. Her visits are often cut short by work calls. The primary caregiver argument evaporated when confronted with my logs and the visible, undeniable truth of my bond with our daughter.